Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to one and all. I want to begin, as always, by embracing all that you bring with you to this space, all of your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences, all that makes you who you are. And as always, this is true of those who hear us say this is an important part of our ritual each Sunday, as well as those who might be hearing it for the first time today. You're equally as welcome and appreciated. And of course, it also includes those of you who are streaming with us. I'm always so grateful to know that you are with us as well. So welcome to one and all. Before we take a few moments to greet one another, I do have a couple of announcements I wanted to mention. One is, you see the items listed on our walls as part of our annual community auction that started last week. We've been off to a great start. I want to thank those who organized it again, as well as everyone who has contributed, I think, over 90 different items to our auction this year. It is an important fundraiser for our congregation each year, something we budget a certain amount that we expect we'll be able to raise, but equally as important, a fundraiser, because it gives us the opportunity to do lots of activities together, both inside and outside of our church. So I hope that you will take a look at some of the items and bid on them and help us raise fun and raise funds through that. So, and then I have this announcement that Cindy Phillips left for me. It's kind of long, so maybe I should start with my sermon and then I'll give this during the sermon period. No, it's not. It's not that bad. This is an important one too. Is Cindy here today? She's not. I always like to give her a hard time, but Cindy's actually really a moving force behind so much, but also behind the Chalice Lighters program. So we're hoping to recruit about 100 new members from our congregation as Chalice Lighters. Now, Chalice Lighters, if you're wondering, are individuals who make up to three financial donations a year of $20 each, so about $60 a year if you're called upon to do so, to the Unitarian Universalist Pacific Northwest District Chalice Lighter Grant Fund. And the funds collected from this end up being granted to UU congregations throughout the area to help promote growth and the growth of our religion. And they go for usually around $15,000, and there are already about 30 individuals in our congregation who are part of it. In order to qualify for an actual grant, we need to have 30%. And so we need about 100 in our congregation to make that happen, or 100 more, I guess. So you can sign up in the back if you'd be willing to do this. I was just at a congregation speaking a couple of weeks ago, and they also asked their congregants to become Chalice Lighters and mentioned that they had already used the process to have 3 significant grants to help them with some building renovations and religious education programs and those sort of things. So it's a real great way that the larger UU community can share resources to help us, and we'd love to be able to be eligible for grants. So I hope that you'll consider that sign up in the back. To sweeten the pot, I think a lot of you have heard me speak about the wonder of virtual reality, a new technology that's out, and I just love virtual reality. I like it better than reality. It's really, really fun. Just this weekend, I had Richard Attenborough in my holodeck, and he invited me to the London Natural History Museum, and he was sitting in front of me explaining lots of scientific wonders in the museum. Imagine that. It's cool, very cool. So what we're going to do, if you are a chalice lighter or become a chalice lighter, each Sunday for the month of this program, we will have a drawing of our chalice lighters, and I will give the lucky winner an hour or so of virtual reality at my home, okay? So hopefully that's enticing. Yeah, and if you've already are a chalice lighter, we're going to put your name in the hat, and if you sign up this week, your name will continue to go in for the subsequent weeks. So, yeah, so please consider becoming a chalice lighter. Really appreciate it. And then also, before we take a couple of moments to greet one another, I wanted to say happy birthday to a dear soul in our congregation. I understand that this is Al Teuton's 82nd birthday. Yeah? And I do think at 82 we should have a happy birthday, right? So, happy birthday to Al.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Al. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Do take a few moments now to say happy birthday to Al and hello to others. And as always, make some new friends today. And if you're just joining us, please don't be shy. All right, thank you so much. There will be more opportunity to visit, of course, during social hour after our service. And real quickly, before we move on to our chalice lighting, I wanted to mention that I will not be here next Sunday, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to be in California taking a week-long class at Ray Kurzweil's school. Do you know Ray Kurzweil? Some of you know Ray Kurzweil, right? Yeah? Sure. He's a futurist, scientist, has been winning prizes since he was a teenager in the 60s, and went to work for Google as their to head their voice analyst department at age 75, and now he's, believe it or not, Google has an eternal life program, and I think Ray Kurzweil is researching eternal life through technology. But anyway, he's a very interesting futurist. He's written a lot of books, including. It's more interesting that Google is doing that, right? But anyway, he has a university out there called the Singularity University, based on the title of one of his books. I've been wanting to go for years, bucket list sort of thing. Not that I'm ready to kick the bucket, but hopefully, if I do, I'll be in the right place at least. But I'll be there, and then the following Sunday I'll be back, and my sermon will be about that experience. So if you're curious at all, please be here. If not, I would understand if you stay away. And then our ministerial intern, Isabel Call, will be our speaker and lead our service next Sunday. So I hope you'll be here to support her as well. Okay, let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Once you choose hope, anything is possible. These are famous words spoken by Christopher Reeve. The following commentaries are mine from the Old Little Nature Chapel. When it seems that the world is on the verge of ruin, let us not feel overwhelmed. Indeed, together we have the power of taking it further towards the light and saving it, by acting as we have the ability to do so in small ways as often as possible, with love and faith in the outcome. Indeed, with the confidence in the gift of light which was bestowed upon us at birth, we can be instruments of miracles. Namaste. Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. Howard Zinn.
Please stand as you're willing and able for the first in-service hymn of the morning, number 112, Do You Hear? Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, through the sky, through the land, do you hear, in the heights on the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain, do you hear, through the roar, through the rush, through the throng, through the crush, do you hear in the hush of your soul, hear the cry, fear hold still, hear the heart's call to will, hear a sigh, startling thrill, in your soul, in your soul. From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear? All the dreams, all the dares, all the signs, all the prayers, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear?
It is now time for our story for all ages, which means that if there's anybody who wants the pleasure of coming forward and sitting on the hard floor, you can do so. Great. Come on up. Hello. How are you, Keaton? Your name is big. Well, you just look like a Keaton to me. Trick, right? See, you get it? You look like a Keaton to me? Because I can read your badge. And is that Sparrow next to you? What is Serenity? Yeah, it's not, the letters aren't quite as big, but anyway, it's good to have you anyway. Good to see you. You go to kindergarten? I'll bet you're pretty smart, aren't you? Do you like school? Are all of you guys smart? Well, I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine that is also very smart. We're going to stay up here, though, because we have some devices he needs to access in a minute. But yes. So this is my friend. I'm very happy to introduce you to and welcome you to Dr. Marty Pants. That's Pants with a Z. Oh, Pants with a Z. So yes, Marty Pants with a Z is Distinguished Professor of Discoverology. Dr. Pants, it's great having you, someone as brilliant as you, with us this morning. I couldn't agree with you more. Okay. Anyway, Professor, for those of us wondering what exactly is discoverology, I've never heard of it before. That's because it's a very difficult thing to research. One must be extremely intelligent, if not a genius, to succeed. So there's just aren't many discoverologists around. Oh, I see. Now I think we're really interested in discoverology. Tell us, what is it that a discoverologist does, Dr. Pants? Well, it may be difficult for you to understand, but a discoverologist is a dipedal anthropomorph that utilizes protoplasmic endowments and ocular faculties to kinesthetically ascertain phenomenon. That's really hard to say. In addition to understanding a bipedal anthropomorph that kinesthetically ascertains phenomenon. You mean a discoverologist discovers things? That's what I just said. Okay. Well, anyway, can you tell us about something that may be one of the wonderful discoveries that you have made? Yes, I once discovered that by drying grass, it is possible to make hay. Okay, wait a minute. Isn't dry grass called hay? Yeah, it is. Okay. Yes, and I discovered it. Okay, that's great. Okay, what else may you have discovered? Well, once, after seeing an acorn fall from a tree, I discovered a force that pulls things towards the earth. I call it drawclination. Drawclination. Okay, well, it sounds a lot like gravity to me. Oh no, there's nothing to worry about. Okay, anything else? Any other amazing discoveries that you have found? Oh yes, just yesterday while on a dig, I unearthed what may be my greatest discovery. Oh, your greatest discovery, what is it? A universal remote control. Hey, wait a minute, that looks very familiar. Where did you find that? Why, I found it digging around your entertainment room. Unfortunately, it seems to be broken. Broken? What do you mean? It was working just a few days ago. Did you check the batteries? Yes, but the only thing it seems to control is the television. Well, what else would it control? Everything. I told you. It's a universal remote control. Yet when I point it to the sun to turn it up, nothing happens. When I turn it on the rain to turn it down, nothing happens. Well, just because it's called a universal remote control doesn't mean it can control everything with it. Are you a discoverologist? Well, no. Then please leave it to the scientists and experts. Otherwise, I will turn down your voice. Oh, okay, well, I'm pretty sure that you can't control other people with that. You can only control the television, not the sun, not the rain, and certainly not me. What makes you so sure? Well, this is the lesson part. Well, as in life, Dr. Pants. Pants. Thank you, Keaton. Dr. Pants. There are some things that we can control, and some things that we can't control, and some things that we just shouldn't control, try to control, like what other people have to say. Do you guys agree? I think I just discovered something else. I'm going to call it the choice to talk. The choice to talk. You mean the freedom of speech? Yes, would you like me to explain? I'm afraid, Dr. Pants, we are out of time. Oh, but it will only take an hour or so. No, I think we're going to hit the mute button.
We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world.
Mama and Papa.
Thank you all so much. We're now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. I did not get any specific requests for candles this week, but I certainly know there's a lot going on our minds and hearts, kind of an important week for us. So we're just going to move into a moment of silence and, as always, give you an opportunity to name aloud those individuals and perhaps those concerns that are most heavy upon you. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion.
You must find the place inside yourself where nothing is impossible. Deepak Chopra. Each one of us is endowed with a spark of the divine light. We are one, and together may create miracles. Believe in the magic of life. Beyond the appearances, there lies a magical place which all of us, armed with faith and determination, have the ability to reach in order to overcome the deepest troubles. Believe in the light. Namaste.
For our reading today, I'm going to invite you to read number 435 with me in unison, number 435 in back of the gray hymnal. And this is a reading that is written by the Reverend Kathleen Matee, who is a Unitarian minister, and many of you know is the daughter of Patty Matee Houff, who was the spouse of Bill Houff, one of the beloved ministers here for many years. So it has an interesting tie to this congregation. And this is also something that for many years at the church we were at in Louisville that Peggy and I and others read every Sunday as part of our morning ritual. So for us it came to epitomize why we come together. And I think it's very beautifully put by Kathleen Matee. So read with me, if you will, in unison, number 435. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment, until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together.
We travel down this weary road, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. We need strength to carry on our load, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Grant us peace, give us courage, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Grant us peace, give us courage, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Road is rocky and the way is dark, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Every road has a different fork, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Grant us peace, give us courage, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Grant us peace, give us courage, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Hallelujah, hallelujah, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Hallelujah, hallelujah, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Grant us peace, give us courage, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Grant us peace, give us courage, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Grant us peace, give us courage, Amani Kutupe Nakustawi. Amani Kutupe Nakustawi.
This is an important symbol today, by the way, if you haven't figured that out. So last month, I introduced the topic of Stoicism, a 2,300-year-old school of thought that helped move Greek philosophy from the abstract to the practical and the personal. It emerged at a time in Greek society during which, much like today, as Samuel Enoch Stump puts it, individual citizens lost the sense of their own importance and their ability to control or perfect their social and political destiny. Individuals increasingly felt this loss over collective life as they were absorbed into a growing Roman Empire. In short, things had gotten real for them, and everything was too troubling and uncertain for anyone to spend much time worrying about abstract ideas that didn't help them feel better about the world. They wanted to know how they were going to get through the takeover of their country by an authoritarian government. Through the shock, through the depression, through the powerlessness, the uncertainty of all that was going on, they needed a way to keep their sanity, to take heart, and to still make a difference. They wanted some control, something to help them feel empowered. Stoicism helped because it was one of only 3 philosophical movements at the time that made philosophy more personal and practical. The other 2 being Epicureanism and cynicism, hedonism and asceticism, respectively, simplistically put. So, Stoicism was more the middle way, allowing its adherents to pursue pleasure and to avoid pain, so long as doing so didn't interfere with what matters most, maintaining peace of mind and doing what is right, whatever the circumstances. Virtue is the greatest good, they thought, because it is the only thing that is useful in all circumstances. Virtue, which they defined as wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, is always in one's control no matter what's happening. We may not have control over much else, they thought, but we can control our attitude and our response to what's going on. To maintain what the Stoics called eudaimonia, a good spirit, sometimes translated a life worth living or the good life that maybe you've heard so much about, they've developed several practices to help keep their ataraxia, their peace of mind, or their tranquility of mind. And these included premeditio malorum, which means foreseeing bad things, or actually practicing negative visualization, through which they imagined what it might be like to lose the things most valuable to them: their wealth, their possessions, their reputation, their loved ones, even their own lives. Not to become desensitized to loss, but to appreciate what they had. The Stoics believed that one of the greatest threats to our tranquility is the chronic desire for what we don't have, due to a lack of appreciation for what is already ours. Thus, regularly imagining what it might be like to be without such things makes us more grateful and thus more content with what we have. They also regularly kept account of and meditated on their daily successes and failings to help them be more aware of what's working in their lives and what isn't, of the patterns they want to encourage and those they wish to abandon. They also practiced self-denial, not fulfilling, at least immediately, every craving, to teach themselves that they can live without satisfying every want and still be happy. Sometimes they even practiced discomfort, doing things that they didn't like doing, like taking a cold bath or going hungry until they were truly starving. To practice keeping a positive attitude even when things aren't optimal, and, to be frank, to toughen themselves up. Stoics did not pamper themselves or think they had a right to always be comfortable. Stoicism accepts that life is painful and it is unjust, and we better find a way to deal with it, not just complain about it. Being in harmony with nature was also a key component of Stoic practice. Every creature, they thought, must be true to its own nature, and it is human nature to be social and to be reasonable. To be humans means being in a relationship with and caring about the welfare of others, and to use our power of reason to make society a better place for everyone. So Stoics practiced logic. Musonius Rufus said, to shun selfishness and to have a high regard for fairness, and being a human being, to wish to help and to be unwilling to harm one's fellow humans is the noblest lesson. And it makes those who learn it just. But the Stoic discipline that I want to most focus on now, which is also central to understanding Stoic philosophy, is what is often referred to as its dichotomy of control. Even if we don't practice negative visualization, self-denial, or discomfort, and if we aren't very social or very logical, so long as we practice this principle, we are well on our way to being good Stoics. The Serenity Prayer may be the best example of this dichotomy and the dilemma we're presented with. It's been made familiar, of course, through the success of the AA program, and is attributed to theologian Richard Niebuhr, who, though not himself a Stoic, often referred to Stoicism in his writings. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It seems a simple supplication, but it suggests how confusing it is for us to distinguish between what we can and can't control. The very first line of Stoic philosopher Epictetus' handbook states, "Of all existing things, some are in our power and others are not in our power." Lesson number 1. Epictetus goes on to distinguish precisely the things he thought that we cannot change, and those that we can. In our power are thought, impulse, will to get and will to avoid, and in a word, everything which is in our own doing. Things not in our power include the body, property, repudiation, office, and in a word, everything which is not in our doing. So that pretty much covers it. Actually, in logic, that's called a complement of class. I won't go into it, but it does make sense to say everything. Anyway, never mind. That's an old philosophy joke. No philosophers anymore. So anyway, coming from one who was born a slave and with a disability, the Epictetus list of things that he considered not in our control shouldn't be surprising. Essentially what happens to our body and our social status. For these same reasons, what he felt is in our control shouldn't be surprising either, namely our attitude and how we respond to whatever circumstances befall us. Can we remain true to our values no matter what? Nowadays, since the advent of psychology, we may not agree as easily that our thoughts and impulses, or our values for that matter, are completely within our control. They may well be driven by unconscious forces and social conditioning, including the desire to fit in with others and to be safe by doing and believing whatever is expected of us. And even if we are conscious of some of the negative drives motivating us, perhaps through lots of therapy and learning the hard way, they can still be difficult to control. We can practice breathing techniques to shift our mood, or try counting to 10 before reacting to a situation, or take up yoga or Tai Chi to help develop a calmer demeanor in general, and still our emotions can sometimes get the best of us, right? But if we agree that things like our thoughts, impulses, and values are the core of our identity, and thus at least should be in our control, then we at least have the power to regularly question our motivations, so that we may better trust that our thoughts, feelings, values, and even our responses are authentic, that is, truly our own. As Socrates said, the unexamined life just isn't worth living. Unlike ancient Roman society in which people were born into slavery and its existence was believed to be ordained by Zeus, that if God willed it, that is, our bodies did belong to another, today more and more of us demand the right to control our own bodies. This is what the Me Too movement, of course, is all about, and why we're still struggling for reproductive freedom, and why many now recognize that both athletes and mass incarceration are an extension of slavery because they allow others to profit from the use of black bodies in particular, and to control their wills, especially by preventing them from voting and having real political power of their own. For the first time, this injustice is being exposed and called into question, at least en masse in our society. But even if things improve and bodily autonomy becomes a norm for everyone in our society, none of us can have complete control over what happens to our bodies, right? Sometimes we get sick, sometimes we're injured, and of course, unless Ray Kurzweil steps in, we're all going to eventually die. Our bodies will die. So whatever is on our list of the things that we can and can't control, Epictetus does make a good point in stating things in our power are by nature free, unhindered, and untrammeled. Things not in our power are weak, servile, subject to hindrance, and dependent on others. If this is so, if you stop and think about it, it's really good news, because the things that we can control are really the only things worth controlling. And the things that we can't control aren't worth controlling to begin with. Yet how many of us spend most of our time worrying about the things that we can't control, that are of no real use, instead of concentrating on the important things that we can? If we worry about the things we can't control, Epictetus further says, you will be hampered, you will mourn, you will be confused, you will blame gods and others. But if we worry about what is in our power to change, he says, no one will ever put compulsion or hindrance on you. You will blame none, you will accuse none, you will do nothing against your will, no one will harm you, you will have no enemy, for no harm can touch you. That's a pretty bold statement. Epictetus, a disabled slave, sounds more like an invincible superhero. So powerful, nothing and nobody can stop him, overpower him, or harm him. Yet he wasn't made of steel, of course. He didn't have a body that was more powerful than a locomotive. He couldn't move faster than a speeding bullet or leap over tall buildings in a single bound. What he meant, rather, is that he and he alone had control over how he responds or responded to his circumstances. Even death was of no concern for the Stoic, because he believed his body was not his own to begin with, that in death, he said, he would give back what is not his own. Of course, this attitude, which he believed was in his complete control, his attitude was in his complete control, may have also been more of an unconscious byproduct of his Hellenistic society, which presumed a mind-body duality, a difference between our minds and our bodies, our spirits and the earth. It's certainly too dualistic for my philosophical taste, but whether we believe we have a spirit or soul that's separate from our body or not, I think we'd all agree that eventually our bodies perish, and until science or medicine can prevent it, this is something that none of us has control over. So worrying too much about our bodies should go on the list of things that weaken, enslave, hinder, and make us dependent. But what we want to mostly focus on here is the wisdom to know the difference between these, between what we can and can't control. It's easy to spend a lot of time regretting the past, for instance, or being upset about present circumstances. But if we focus too much of our energy on, say, what happened during the last national election, or wishing whoever is in office now wasn't, our energy is mostly wasted. Fantasizing about how things should have been or should be may give us some brief solace until we are forced to come back to reality, but chances are imagining things that aren't true and never will be true can ultimately only lead to more disappointment. As Epictetus says, it is impossible that happiness and yearning for what is not present should ever be united. When it comes to the past and to the immediate present, we need the serenity to accept the things we cannot change if we are to keep our peace of mind. Although we can't control the future entirely, we may have some power to influence how some things end up. It's easy to feel powerless when we focus too much on the past and can't cope with the way things are, because we truly are powerless to do anything about these things. During the past national election, for example, some voters were so upset that Bernie Sanders wasn't the nominee, I'm one of them, and were rightfully angry over the Democratic National Committee's unfair shenanigans thwarting him, that they just couldn't bring themselves to vote. It may be there were enough of them even to have unintentionally impacted the outcome of the election anyway. Worrying too much about the past or being too depressed about the present to care can rob us of what power we do have to influence the next moment, tomorrow, maybe even the far future. This requires us to have the courage to change the things we can if we want to have peace of mind. This week, for example, we can vote in a midterm election, in case you haven't heard, the outcome of which will be crucial regarding the direction our country takes in the coming months and years. Voting may seem a small, almost impotent act for one person, and if doing so represents the extent of one's personal political power, which I fear it does in our country, in what's supposed to be a democracy, I agree it is too small. A robust democracy requires more opportunities for individual citizens to engage in the political process than just slipping a ballot in the mailbox or into a voting machine once or twice a year. And that's if you're lucky enough to be able to do that, or if you care enough to be able to do that. But let's not worry about that now. It's one of those things that's out of our control. The fact that the enemies of democracy, by which I mean those who work against the idea that every person should have an equal vote and voice in how they are governed, have worked so hard to weaken the power of the individual voter, especially Democratic voters, through gerrymandering voting districts with sophisticated computer algorithms, massive voter purging and draconian voter ID laws targeting minorities, trick ballots and hanging chads, mass voter disenfranchisement through a racist criminal justice system, and at this very moment attempting to do so by taking away the birthright citizenship of brown people. What do you think that is about? And sending thousands of troops to the southern border to prevent more brown people from entering this country. It tells us just how powerful our votes are considered by some. To better grasp the difference between what we can and can't control, Stoic philosopher William Irvine reminds us that what we're talking about is really more of a trichotomy of control. There are things over which we have complete control, he says, things over which we have no control at all, and things over which we have some, but not complete control. In gaining the wisdom to know the difference, this notion of some control is an important nuance. In my opinion, there's much that we have no control over whatsoever, as much as we'd like to think we do. And there's very little, if anything, that rephrase that. No, not rephrase it. What's the word I'm looking for? Reaccent it. Let me reaccent that. There may be very little, if anything, that we have complete control over. In other words, maybe nothing. Even our attitude and will, right, which the Stoics took for granted that we have complete control over, may again really be something that is more driven by unconscious and social forces than any of us would like to admit. So I'd say that most of what we can control falls under this third category of some, but not complete control. Mostly that's the power we have to influence things. Some, but not complete control. And this may be why most of us think that the future is also beyond our control, and why, therefore, we don't have the wisdom to know the difference. Though it may not be much, we do have the power, some power, to control or shape the future. We may fail, that is, but we can still try to make it better. Not just by voting, but also by working towards the changes that we hope to see in a variety of ways. Even then, just as we can at least control our attitudes and responses to the past and present, we should internalize our goals for the future as much as possible. In other words, we should commit to doing our best and being our best regardless of the outcome. Because we can't usually guarantee the outcome, right? The best we can do is our best. The goal of the Stoics, Irvine says, was not to change the world, but to do their best to change the world. Whether the future or otherwise, the wisdom to know the difference between what we can and can't control challenges us to mostly concern ourselves with what we have some but not complete control over. Now, on the one hand, this should provide us with some real relief because we're off the hook when it comes to the ultimate outcome. All of us must simply do our best. On the other hand, knowing that there's a chance of failure may discourage some of us from even trying. I've often heard it said, don't pick a fight that you can't win, or you've got to choose your battles carefully. But if we don't risk losing, we will never have an opportunity to win. When in 2004 I vowed to stop performing wedding ceremonies until I could perform them equally for all couples, especially gay and lesbian couples, I was often told, well, you'll be waiting a very long time, or that's never going to happen. But within just 8 years, largely because of millions of people like me working and sacrificing on this issue, I was back in the wedding business. I've lost more battles than I won, which, if you think about it, makes me more of a loser than a winner. But that's okay, because for a Stoic, it's not about winning, right? It's just doing our best, being our best. In addition to the future, I'd add a couple of other things to the list of what we have some but not complete control over. As I said, psychology has shown that what the ancient Stoics thought was wrong, that we don't necessarily have control even over our thoughts, values, and attitudes, because they may be driven by unconscious forces and social pressures. Likewise, our emotions are hard to control. They are usually upon us, sweep over us, and diminish before we even knew what hit us. No, we don't have complete control over our internal life, our unconscious and emotional life, though it often seems these things have a lot more control over us than we would like. But this doesn't mean that we don't have some control. We can't help what feelings come over us, but we can control how we respond to them, or how we react to what's causing them, to our circumstances and to others. We may be the unwitting pawns of cultural paradigms, but we can continue to examine the worth of our own beliefs, to question and challenge ourselves, rather than thoughtlessly accepting our ideas as common sense or succumbing to the fear that so many experience when their ideas are challenged. We may not have complete control over our attitude, but we do have some. And sometimes that's enough to help us maintain our ataraxia, our peace of mind, our tranquility. Finally, I'd add another dimension to the dichotomy of control, or the trichotomy of control. In addition to the things that we have complete control over, have no control over, and have some control but not complete control over, we should consider that there are some things we have control over that we should not control. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein may be a good illustration of this, because sometimes our science and technology can get ahead of us. We can decapitate mountains to more easily extract coal. Should we? We can build atomic bombs and drop them on our enemies. Should we? There are many things that our species has the power to control. Soon we'll be able to make designer babies, something previously called eugenics. But should we? Just because we can doesn't mean it's moral. These, however, are grand examples. On a more personal scale, I'd say that there are two things within our power to control that we should not. Firstly, we shouldn't take on responsibilities that aren't our own. It's hard to say no. I'm sorry, I can't help. Especially when we are caring persons and there are many worthy causes inviting our participation. But we must allow others to have their own responses to the world, and to be true to ourselves, and to use our time wisely, because there is only so much that we can do and only so much that we should expect of ourselves. Let others deal with what's important to them, and don't feel obligated to take on someone else's great idea. It may be a great idea, but let them take it on. And don't be too uncomfortable saying no. And this ties in with the second thing, the most important thing: others. We sometimes can, but shouldn't control others. We shouldn't try to control their mindsets, or their feelings, or their speech, and sometimes not even their behavior, so long as their behavior doesn't harm or violate the rights of others. Much of human history, at least the bad parts, the worst parts, have been about some person or persons trying to control other persons. It may not be as atrocious, but it's no less immoral for us to try controlling the minds and wills of others, forcing our wishes upon them without listening or giving them a genuine voice in the decisions impacting them. And I'm so committed to this value that when I recently wanted to hold a public screening of a controversial film at our church, which I still want and hope that we can reimagine that in the near future, I called for a congregational vote and even asked that we skew the decision in favor of those who might disagree with me by asking for a 2/3 majority. I realize as the minister here that I have a lot of political influence, and I could have tried pushing my will through, but this would have been unethical, would have violated my values, and ultimately would have been destructive and unloving. There are so many tricks that we use against others to manipulate them into getting our own way that I won't even try to outline them. Perhaps you can take time to think of some of the ways others have tried to manipulate you and some of the best ways you're able to manipulate them. It must be enough to acknowledge that dominating the wills of others just to get our way is a poor, to say the least, way of relating to the world. Just because we can control others doesn't mean we should. Today there are many things that overwhelm us and seem out of our control. News about global warming and the destruction of the environment becomes more alarming and dire each day, as it did through 2 reports just this week. Yet another authoritarian leader was put into power just this week in Brazil. There have been so many mass shootings in our country and no response to our cries for change that we're finally beginning to not ask for it anymore. Income inequality, white nationalism, fascism, and the list of things that seem beyond our control continues to mount. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to accept the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you.
Well, I think I found a truly stoic hymn right here in our hymnal. It's number 124, Be That Guide, and it actually advocates 4 different stances or mindsets that we can use, and I think in almost any circumstance. So I would invite you to please stand and sing with me, Be That Guide.
The most important thing in your life right now is for you to find your own inner truth and follow it. Anonymous. Being true to ourselves is one of the essential achievements for which we must all strive, in order to lead a life that reflects our deepest aspirations. Believe in your own magic. Namaste. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.